Who's in charge of culture or setting culture or establishing or maintaining culture in an org?
Yeah, it depends, and I always hate an "it depends" response, but it depends. Um, it depends on the organization. I believe that a CEO has the responsibility for the oversight of it, just as they do. You know, their signature is on the financials and they're accountable for that. Their signature is on the culture and they're accountable for that. So they have, just like they have a CFO who ensures that all of the right mechanisms are in place so that the financials flow the right way
Yeah.
and everything comes together the way it's supposed to. That's what the body of their HR professionals should be supporting them and doing. And, you know, if we use that analogy a little further, managers have some accountability in those financials and making good decisions. Managers and leaders have responsibilities in the behaviors they take that create culture. And so, you know, for HR professionals, we are the ambassadors and the people who should know how culture is created and shaped. And we should support our company leaders in making sure that their um, visions and strategies are achieved, and support our leaders in, you know, enabling the behaviors and practices in the organization that create that culture.
What if the culture needs to be what if the culture what if it stinks? What if it was built poorly or built short-sightedly and that there are things that the the culture needs to be revamped? How do you communicate that and like how does have you had to have conversations like that with CEOs? And you know, you're talking about their baby many times, right? Sometimes, you know, many times like the founder of a company, and it's like, how do you tell them?
Like the Seinfeld episode, that's a baby, right? Like, oh, that's a baby.
That's right.
Um, yeah, yeah. So that's a culture. Is
Yeah.
that one you want? And it is like the baby. You can't like give the baby back. That's
Right.
your baby, right? And so, and that's where, you notice I said you don't change the culture. I said adapt, and I talked about it in terms of behaviors. And and this is where my view on culture, I think, is a little different. And I've had success with this. And I studied for a long time what works for culture and what doesn't. What doesn't work when you go is when you go to somebody and say, this culture stinks. It's, you know, you got to wholesale change it. And because the reality is there is no culture that 100% of it is horrible. There are always elements of some culture that are good. And there are elements that need to change.
Well,
And when you anchor it on what does the business need to achieve, and you have a conversation in terms of what are you trying to do and how far are you from that now? You know, like what is and maybe it's not a company that um, is really looking out strategically. You know, that's a challenge too when you get to culture. It's like not
sure.
only is there maybe not some maturity in culture, there's not maturity in strategic planning,
Mm,
right? But they probably have an idea of what they want to achieve in their business, and they probably have a good idea of where they're at now. So you start there. Okay,
yeah.
this is where you want to go. This is where you're at now. If you got here, what would be different? And you have the conversation about the behaviors. And then you just have the conversation about, okay, so what do we have to do to get those behaviors to show up? What are
Yeah.
you committed to do differently? Is there anything in your behaviors that you would do differently? And so uh, um, I was talking to somebody earlier today, in fact, and I said, if you try and change culture for culture's sake, I don't necessarily agree with that. because it just becomes this like slog, and why are we doing this, and it's this other thing on top of everything else that doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
But if you make it about, we've got this goal, we've got this mission, we've got this purpose, and the behaviors or the practices that you start implementing or supporting or reinforcing or celebrating are in service of this new outcome you're trying to achieve,
Yeah.
it feels a lot better
Yeah.
than just feeling like you're getting, punched every time you're not doing the right culture.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, that
Um,
that makes sense. That
and
makes
so
sense.
I think about it a little differently than I know some of my other culture peers may.
Yeah, I think you're right when you say that, you know, in most of the time, the vision, maybe they've gone astray, but the initial vision was one that made a lot of sense and maybe just wasn't carried out in the right way. Maybe there were hiccups along the way, but there's something if you get back to like the very beginning, things that you know that you can build upon, right?